We are back. It's Jesuit lunch hour. It's Friday. It's 11:30 Central Time. That can mean one thing. I hope you have your lunch, or if you don't have your lunch, or if you're in a different time zone, all are welcome. This is Father Michael Rossman with a new Jesuit guest, Mr. Daniel Mascarenhas. Welcome, Daniel, to Jesuit Lunch Hour.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Michael, for inviting me.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Daniel, as always, at the beginning, I ask guys to say a bit about their backgrounds. Can you tell us kind of where you come from and what led you to this point?
Yeah, I grew up in India, in Goa, that's in South India on the West Coast. Moved to the US for graduate school in mechanical engineering at the University of Minnesota. Then I worked in California for a few years in semiconductors and entered the Jesuits, the West Province. So we have four provinces in the US. I entered the USA West. And that meant the first 2 years were in Los Angeles at the novitiate in just outside LA in Culver City. And yeah, moved to St. Louis in fall of 2018 to study philosophy and theology at St. Louis University. So just started my third year, and hopefully I will be graduating with a master's in philosophy in the spring of this school year.
Great. So you have some familiarity with the Midwest, my beloved part of the country. So you are currently in St. Louis, and previously you mentioned you were in grad school at the University of Minnesota, but the sunshine of California pulled you away from us in the Midwest, and you joined the Jesuits out there. Say more.
Yeah, I think I was getting a little pale in Minnesota, so I had to go out west to get a bit of sun to, keep my tan. So I moved out west. Yeah, so I guess in some ways I did have a chance of entering the Midwest province as well. I don't really have any strong connection to the West Coast. As I mentioned, I moved out here for graduate school, so I don't have any family on the
Sure.
West Coast. But yeah, I entered the novitiate in California because that's where I met the Jesuits. I actually went to a Jesuit school for 10 years in Goa, but I kind of lost contact. So when I reconnected with the Jesuits, it was with the Jesuits in California, and I felt that that would be the place to join, as I did not know any better. But I think in hindsight, I think that among the four provinces, that's the one that suits me best. No offense to other provinces, but
None taken, or at least not much taken. No, no, no. No, that's great. And Daniel, so you were working in California, not just California, but Silicon Valley. Say more about that. What were you doing exactly, and how was it kind of navigating, your life of faith in such a context?
yeah. So when I graduated, I was kind of looking for jobs all over the place, and the one that I liked the most was in Santa Clara. This is a company called Applied Materials. Now, this is not the startup companies that the Bay Area is famous for. This company is about 40 years old,
Okay.
so it's like Intel, one of those blue chip companies that have been around. So I was working in design of machines. Applied Materials makes machines that make semiconductors. So, for example, Intel or Samsung, or TSMC, these companies are the big manufacturers of semiconductors. And by semiconductors, I mean computer, like either memory devices or processors, which are pretty much there in every device these days, most commonly in your phone or laptop, I suppose. So Applied Materials makes machines that makes semiconductors. So you can think of Applied Materials making the oven, and Intel is making the lasagnas in the ovens that are made by Applied Materials. And the lasagnas are your computer chips. They are kind of similar in the sense of layers. So you can think of Intel making the lasagnas or also coming up with recipes to make the lasagnas, but we make the ovens. So I was in machine design at Applied Materials at their main R&D center in Santa Clara. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like, engineering, like math and science is rather one thing I'm good at. I'm not really much of a singer or dancer or a sports person. So math and science was my thing. Enjoyed it. The Bay Area is the land of milk and honey and expensive real estate. Uh, and Northern California is absolutely beautiful. Uh, and for the most part, I think I felt like I was contributing towards, human progress, since technology is what is at the forefront of what many people deem to be human progress. It was great to be part of that. I worked there for almost 5 years.
Great. And
I think you mentioned a little bit about the faith part.
yeah, so well, just kind of picking up on what you just said. So, what led you to go from working towards human progress in terms of our technological advancement to perhaps spiritual progress and wanting to be a Jesuit?
Yeah, in terms of my faith life, I've had ups and downs. I think at some point during college, I probably was at my lowest in terms of my faith journey. But through a series of experiences, especially the Newman Center at the University of Minnesota, Father Bob O'Donnell was really helpful in helping me see faith in terms of how it is intellectually viable. I often had this struggle of faith and science, and growing up with a faith that did not really explore the intellectual side. I felt inadequate, and I kind of felt that science is kind of superior to faith. And Father Bob O'Donnell was very helpful in helping me uh, continue that conversation and that the dialogue between faith and science and how they fit together in my life. So I was fairly religious when I was in the Bay Area, which is pretty rare, especially in tech. I think a lot of my coworkers were atheist or agnostic, and yeah, it was kind of a curiosity for them as to why was I involved with the church. I try to be involved outside of Sunday Mass with the Diocese of San Jose, their young adult ministry. Um, they had a really interesting event once a month called Deconstructing the Faith, and I really enjoyed that because it was a way to ask questions and kind of explore these difficult topics from different angles. The hot topics like uh, abortion, women's ordination, Catholic morality, the veracity of the Bible. How do we know if Jesus really raised from the dead or not? And in some ways, it was great to talk about these topics with other young adults, and we would have a priest who would moderate the discussions, and so kind of give the official church teachings. And I found it helpful because for the first time, I felt like I could openly ask questions about my faith without being demonized, or looked down upon. And for me, that was a revelation because I could grapple with my faith and be the doubting Thomas without being cast aside. So that was a good experience for me. I also met a couple of priests from the Diocese of San Jose, Father Brendan McGuire and Father Joe Kim, who studied engineering before they entered the seminary. And so in some ways, it told me that the ship has not yet sailed. Even though I was in my late 20s, like you can study engineering and then become a priest. Like those two things are not mutually exclusive. There was also a ministry, a Jesuit ministry called Christus Ministries. They work with the young adults in California, and they do a bunch of retreats and other young adult events, and they try to integrate young adults in the parish life, and so to kind of help young adults find a home in the church. And through that ministry, on one of their retreats, I really understood the idea of a personal relationship with Jesus. Uh, I think I kind of got carried away with the idea of the intellectual side of faith, and God became kind of this philosopher's God, this power out there that exists and created everything. But what does God have to do with me? And exploring the idea of the incarnation through Jesus and that relationship that Jesus knows me personally, uh, kind of brought God down, if you may. I hope that's not heretical, but brought God down to my level, so that I could relate to God in a personal manner. So all these experiences kind of helped me, journey in my faith. But I think the point about transitioning to Jesuits was a question. I used to go to this monastery. There's a cloistered Carmelite monastery in Santa Clara, and I used to go there and sit there a couple of times a week. Just sit there in the morning. Sometimes pray. Sometimes just sit and look at the beautiful chapel. And one day I just had this question: what would I be happiest doing?
Hmm.
And happiest in the superlative. I was happy, but hypothetically, what would I be happiest doing? And for some reason, the answer came a priest. And I thought to myself, well, that's not happened before. A lot of people asked me growing up. I was a really good student. I'm the youngest of three boys in the family. People would ask me, like, oh, we need a priest in the family. But I never asked the question for myself. And I think this was the first time I actually asked the question for myself. And the answer came a priest. And I thought, well, I could explore that. I read a few books, got a spiritual director, talked to a few priests, religious sisters, and it really resonated with me what they were talking about, like what gives them joy, what gets them out of bed in the morning, of all their experiences over the years, what do they carry with them. And the more I heard their stories, the more I felt like this is what I want to do. Like this is where, like, God was inviting me to this life through my deepest desire for happiness. I think we're all made for happiness. God wants us to be happy, but I think happiness through a relationship with God, like happiness not to be confused with pleasure, but what really gives life meaning and fulfillment, and that kind of happiness. And I think these conversations help me discern that, like, God was inviting me to this life, and nothing is certain. I'm always a skeptic. I'm still a skeptic through and through. I doubt myself on many days. And recently, I was praying with a call of Matthew, and I preached in our community on that gospel. And yeah, the two things that stood out from Matthew's call was, one was he was surprised, and two, he was hesitant. Surprised because he wasn't expecting to be called by Jesus, and I wasn't expecting to be called by Jesus either. I mean, I was fairly religious. I was, I think, a good Catholic, but I was never one of the in groups of the church. I didn't study theology in college, and I was not involved at any. I wasn't working for the church in any way. So I just felt like I was not really one of the kind of persons who would be called to this life. And hesitancy, am I good? Am I going to be good at this? Is this something God is inviting me to do? And how do I know that this might not turn out to be what I think it would be? And so Matthew, has this hesitancy, but that's where trust comes. You trust in Jesus. I would never be 100% sure about anything. I would not be 100% ready for anything. And whatever is not complete, Jesus completes and invites me into this life. So after about a year and a half, I don't know, actually 2.5 years after I first got the thought, I entered the society. So
okay. Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. And you hit upon some themes that I think a number of the young people that I work with are also wrestling with. Kind of this idea of, okay, is it what I want or what God wants? And sometimes I think people have perhaps an unnecessarily sort of strong separation between our desires and God's desires for us. I mean, I don't think every passing whim, every passing thought is necessarily coming directly from God. But if we really believe that God knit us in our mother's womb, and if we believe that God doesn't want us to be miserable, I think looking to our hearts, where do we find life and joy, as you were articulating? I think that's a really significant element of what God wants for us, if really God loved us into being. And then you also talk about, skepticism and certainty or lack thereof. And perhaps I think many people are hoping that and expecting that things will be certain. But that doesn't happen very often. Really, we do our homework, we discern, but inevitably we're going to have to trust, have to dive in, even without 100% certainty. So you are in St. Louis right now, and I see something behind you on your bookshelf that is not a book.
Yes.
It's a little hard. Okay, yeah, it's a little
Yeah,
hard to see, but
it's the glare. It's the glare. Yeah. Yeah. So that is,
what is that exactly? Other than
yeah, this is one of my life passions. Java with the Jesuits. You can follow us on Instagram. This is a free promo for our Instagram page. Uh, it's a very simple ministry. I think there's this old Jesuit joke like can I drink coffee while praying, and the superior says no. So then the Jesuit asks, can I pray while drinking coffee? And the superior says yes. So the idea is, how do we take spiritual conversation out to the public?
Mhm.
I think there's a power dynamic, whether we like it or not, between clergy. I'm not a priest, but if I'm in clerics, people don't know the difference, and the general public. And there's a distance, there's a gap, and it's really hard for college students who might just want to talk to a Jesuit, and we cannot expect them to come to our office or come to the sacristy and talk to us. I think it's important for us to go out there and be where they are at. And so, well, before the pandemic, we used to have free coffee and bagels and some other treats. Free food is what invites everybody in. So we would have free food there, and a bunch of us Jesuits would hang out and just strike up conversations with students. And, it can be anything mundane about talking about the weather, or what's your major, why are you studying that? What clubs are you interested in? It just builds relationships. And occasionally there would be moments of spiritual conversations like, why does the church teach something? Or this is something I've been struggling in prayer. Or when they would know that I studied engineering before I entered the society, the whole faith and science thing, like how does the church relate to science? Plenty of opportunities for good conversations. And I think it was a way for us to take the church out there. I know it's a Catholic school, but I think a lot of students can go through 4 or 8 or 16 years of Catholic education, never having talked one on one to a priest or a religious sister. That's just a reality today. Our lay partners do an excellent job in our schools, but there's something about us as Jesuits being present to students and just getting to know them. And in some ways, it's good for me to get to know students and what's going on in their lives. Like, how is God present in the lives of students, college age students? What are they praying about? What brings them joy? What are they struggling with? And it's something I take with me in my prayer as well. So every Friday, 2 or 3 hours out there, trying to talk to students. And it's a great way to talk to students who might never step into a church or into campus ministry. But we are there just handing. We don't have coffee now because of the pandemic, but we still have a low key Java every Friday where we hang out and have like stickers and mugs out there and try to attract students.
Yeah, no, that's great. Pope Francis, of course, has talked a lot about how he wants a church that is out on the streets. So you are doing that at least out on the quad or on the
Yeah.
campus at St. Louis University. Can you share a story or two from the experience of talking with students? Yeah, I mean, have surprising things happened through those encounters that are facilitated by the free food and drink?
Yeah, absolutely. Like recently, without the free food or drink, so this year, a couple of weeks back, there was this young man who came up to me, said he's doing a PhD in biology. So he's in grad school. He made it clear he did not choose SLU because it's a Catholic university. But after he accepted and arrived here, he was just browsing through the main website of SLU and realized it was a Catholic school. And he grew up Catholic until like late high school and then fell away from the church for many reasons and never really thought much about the church until he was at a Catholic school and realized it was Catholic. And he found a link that talked about Java with the Jesuits, went to our page, found out that we are there on Fridays. So he came up and talked to me. And one of his questions, as I've mentioned, is the whole faith and science thing. Pop culture has so ingrained in people that the church is backwards, traditional, anti-science, and it's just something people take as granted. And we got to talking, and since I spent 2 years in LA, he's from San Bernardino, which is about an hour east of LA. And so we were talking what I was doing in LA as a Jesuit novice, where was I before that, and we had a sorry. I think it's because my Gmail is logged in and it's
Sure.
have Google Fi. Excuse me. Yeah. We just got to talking about science and religion. What does the Catholic Church teach? The whole Galileo affair, or why does the Catholic Church teach about like IVF? Why is the Church against IVF, and how faith and science kind of in his view were opposed. And I was like, morality is outside the realm of science. Science does not tell us what is right and what's wrong. It just tells us how things are. So that was a great conversation. And then I met a student, I think it was last year. He went to a Jesuit high school for 4 years out in Dallas, and then came to SLU, and this was his 3rd or 4th year at SLU. And he said, in 7 or 8 years of Jesuit education, he had never spoken to a Jesuit one-on-one. I'm not saying that the Jesuits in Dallas are not doing a good job. Maybe this guy was just shy, during high school. And then maybe in college, when he came to college, he must have grown up and found his place where he's at. But there was no opportunity. He was not that religious, so he didn't want to go to campus ministry retreats. And there was no real place for him to just go and talk to a Jesuit, because outside of campus ministry and a few Jesuits who are teaching, it's hard to just come across a Jesuit, and even harder to just go up and talk to somebody. So just had a great conversation about Ignatian spirituality, how does it apply in the Catholic Church, what he can take from his Jesuit education in his spiritual life, how does Ignatius invite us to pray, what's the whole point of being men and women for others, what does it mean? And I just thought, we have high schools, and sometimes I taught at a Jesuit high school for 5 months during the novitiate, and I know high school students can be pretty shy, and they come to a Jesuit school, and this is just an opportunity for us to be there. Yeah, among many other conversations, these two kind of stand out for me.
Well, those are great. Thanks for sharing that. Daniel, we're probably going to be wrapping up our time, but I always like to ask guys if they have any advice that they might give to someone in discernment, whether that means a person thinking about religious life, like the Society of Jesus, or people who are discerning something else in their lives, wherever they are. So do you have a little nugget of wisdom for us this Friday?
God wants you to be happy. I'm all about the happiness and joy part. And joy doesn't mean that there's no suffering or difficult times. Joy is deeper than that. And so it's not selfish to ask, should I do something because it makes me happy? Sometimes there's the desire to do something good, and it is counted as good only if I'm really struggling and this is bringing me pain. I like working out, I like running, and I get that mentality that, no pain, no gain kind of a thing. But I think in a spiritual life, God wants you to be happy. And it is not a bad thing if you feel like you're having a great time, and it's not selfish. And so I would pray with, how is God inviting me to be happy? And discernment is a slow process, as Michael mentioned at the start, things can come and go, and not everything is from God. But what sustains you, what stays with you? As Ignatius was praying, he used this imaginative idea of imagining doing something. And if the joy or happiness that comes from an imagination of you playing a certain role, if it stays with you longer, that's something God may be inviting you to. And the second thing is trust. Nothing is 100%. I'll never be 100% about anything in my life. And that's okay. Even if you do something that God is not inviting you to do, that's okay. God is walking with you. I like to think of it as God has a hope for you. It's not that God has a plan, because plan can sound kind of rigid. If I don't do this, there is no new plan. But God can recalculate. God has a hope for you. And Jesus will walk with you. Even if your discernment goes wrong, that's okay. Jesus is going to be there with you no matter what you do. And that just gives me immense consolation, that it removes the pressure. I need to get this right. There's a sense of like FOMO. Like, if I don't do the thing that God wanted me to do, I'm going to be miserable. No, like, Jesus is going to be with you no matter what.
Daniel Mascarenhas, from Goa to Minnesota to making ovens for lasagna in Silicon Valley, and now to St. Louis University. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So this has been Jesuit Lunch Hour, powered by beajesuit.org. We will be back next week with another great Jesuit. Thanks so much, everyone, and God bless.
Thank you.